Design as power. How government uses design. Lee Atwater said, "Perception is reality." Imagine a box. Boxes can be ordinary, or they can be something very, very special. How you design a box can infer meaning to it. And how one responds to that meaning gives context to the power that design has. Let's look at the superpower, the United States of America, and how it uses the power of design to inspire through its space program, to defend through its armed forces, and inform through its new Affordable Care Act. Information is power, and how government frames its identity can brand the power it wields. The space program was birthed out of the Cold War, ironically motivated by the destruction of all life on this planet. Humans endeavored to lift life into outer space. In doing so, under the guidance of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, NASA was born in 1958. The idea was to inspire Americans through technology and science. In 1959, the branding of those aspirations became affectionately nicknamed the meatball. Fast forward to 1975. The space shuttle program was well into its development. NASA tried to inspire a new era of technology represented by the new worm logo. This logo, though, was controversial because the design efficiency it represented. People complained there wasn't enough there. Underlying the branding of the space program was a distrust of the public of the space program. People felt because it was born out of the Cold War, it was another military project that didn't need to be funded for science and exploration. To assuage those fears, NASA decided not only to put a civilian in space, but a teacher. Who doesn't love teachers? So in 1984, President Ronald Reagan announced a teacher would be sent into space. Out of 11,000 applicants, Christy McAuliffe was selected. No one could have imagined the horror of the space shuttle exploding just 73 seconds into flight. And as it fell in pieces from 48,000 feet, so did the hopes and dreams of those hearts who had launched with it. Would we ever go to space again? The fresh scars of this disaster may have tarnished NASA's brand forever. NASA would have to reinvent itself, and in doing so, it borrowed from popular culture. Using shows like Firefly, a popular science fiction about space cowboys, helped make NASA exciting again. By rebranding, NASA has made its force, identity, strong. As a callback to what has made their identity great, the newer programs are borrowing from their past glories. And speaking of old glories, is that a Northrop YB-49? Those things flew back in 1944, nicknamed the Old Flying Wing. And can someone tell me, please, why am I looking at a B-2 bomber during a Super Bowl commercial? That drone looks like a Cylon from Battlestar Galactica. Ooh, this looks mysterious. Out of the reflection of the pilot's eye, we see covered what people are theorizing to be America's next bomber. Brought to you by the people of Northrop Grumman. It is interesting that the military is allowing its branding to be handled by the same people President Eisenhower warned us against, the military-industrial complex. We have a professional military in this country where people elect to defend it. The alternative, the draft, was not all that popular. Yep, not popular. Still, not that popular. You get the idea that people just did not like the draft in this country. So the alternative was propaganda. You incite, you stir emotions, you get people angry. I need to fight! Though I think it's important to create a distinction that not all identity making is propaganda. Creating an identity is important, especially if we want to have a professional military that does not require a draft. So the marketing and advertising is about framing who they are. As outlandish as some of this advertising is, most of today's military branding has less to do with the demonization of our enemies, like the propaganda of the past. You can see a trend with the Air Force to use science fiction and fantasy as a means of extolling defense. This is a sharp contrast to the stark realities that the Marines allude to, though their heroic archetype language would fit well in an analysis by Joseph Campbell. Just replace the word Marines with a hero moves towards the sounds of tyranny, injustice, and despair. Why, you could almost hear Superman running in that direction, couldn't you? And speaking of Superman, look at the traits that the Marines claim to create in their men and women. But not just a specific group of men and women, but look at the intentional use of race to symbolize diversity. Furthermore, look at the slogan, "For us all." The Army has attempted to create an identity using video games. Controversially, you could argue this is to appeal to a younger demographic. However, the branding and identity campaign by the U.S. Army seems to be multifaceted, as this particular advertisement seems to be gearing towards the more professional, advertising that the Army is a lifetime experience. I just thought that this was really clever. The American Navy seems to be also tapping into that almost comic book sense of that's good and that is evil. Why they call themselves a global force for good. Might as well be talking about the Avengers. This advertisement also seems to imply that the Navy will help you with your future, implying that you could become a doctor, all because of your career started with the Navy. Who doesn't love their mom? Think of Norman Rockwell's Four Freedoms, of why we should defend America. Mom tucking her children in. I'll fight for you, Mom! And I'll make some friends. Hopefully, Mom is healthy. The way government informs is also a power. In 2010, the debate was pitched for what became known as the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act was to provide insurance to all uninsured Americans throughout our country. It is important to understand it from a design perspective to remove all subjective feelings of politics. That is not to say politics weren't entered into the very heated and visual debate. The supporters of the Affordable Care Act won. March 23, 2010, President Barack Obama signed into legislation the Affordable Care Act. When the American people were being informed of the ACA, something happened to the branding and identity. What was intended to be sold as healthcare.gov was tagged with the title Obamacare. It didn't help the brand that third-party supporters were also calling the ACA Obamacare, even when attacking the enemies of the original legislation. Early hacking and security fears also played a huge role in the early branding of the ACA. Healthcare.gov, the implementation of the ACA, had many technical issues. However, many like Ringling's Kimberly Elam see government's relationship with professional design firms ever strengthening. And though the Teal Media Group would merge to become a different company that no longer advertises their work on what they did with healthcare.gov, that design influence they still use and can be seen all around the web. What this relationship between government and this private design group created was a well-designed site accessible to millions. Government known for utilizing the lowest bidder embraced legibility and readability to inform. People sought healthcare.gov for personal use. Business use are still looking at it today to answer their needs. It's fun to note that the website resembles travel discount sites that so many people are familiar with. The ACA has always struggled with its popularity, and it may be too soon to judge its overall effectiveness, but one can definitely see the impact it's had with government's ability to inform. To inspire, defend, and to inform, these days are much different than the days of propaganda of yore. Our federal government, understanding this technological world that we live in, is embracing the power of design. Design.